Hello and welcome to Inventing, the show designed to specifically help dramatically improve the abysmal 98% failure rate. We'd like to see it better than 2%. I think there's better odds at the casino. And we do that by interviewing guests from the innovation space throughout the industry of innovation, as well as Fortune 500 companies, guest experts on specific services like patents, trademarks, copyrights, and so forth. And today, my guest, I'm actually really excited about Bill McHenry. Bill is a 25-year veteran entrepreneur and marketeer, primarily working with innovation, new innovation, and launching it in retail. And we all want to know how to get our products on those shelves. And for those of us not looking to license, this is going to be a really good interview for you. So with that, thank you so much, Bill, for joining me. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are.
Of course, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you've had Envision Marketing and Sales and Widgeteer for over 25 years now?
Well, Envision Sales and Marketing, it became Widgeteer, is probably about 15 years old. Prior to that, I was in the corporate world for about 15 years. I guess I'm adding up to me. You're starting to act my age, maybe. In the corporate world, I was with 3M, actually Nestle, 3M, and Philips, always in sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing with 3M, that must have been quite an experience. Was that right out of school?
Actually, Nestle was right out of school for about 2 years, and then 3M came after that. And actually, it's funny you pick up on that, because that actually was the company that really kind of kicked me into being entrepreneurial. They gave you
caught the bug.
Yeah, they really did, they gave you more and more rope and the more you took it, the more rope you got. And they pull you back once in a while, but for the most part, it was kind of interesting. And back then, I remember I came up with this crazy idea to develop a multi-pack of videotape back then. And the multi-pack then included high-grade videotape, which we made more money on, more profit on. But it was the same price as the standard grade ones. And first I was told no, but I thought, well, it seemed like a good idea. So I went to all my customers to see if they would do it. I charged them a little more money, and I remember going back to my boss saying, I remember when I asked you about that multi-pack, and he said, yes. And I said, well, would you be real mad if I maybe went to my customers and offered it to them? And he did get kind of mad. But I said, well, I also got purchase orders. And I handed him, it was like almost $1 million worth of purchase orders.
Oh my God. Wow. That's a hell of a story.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't be mad at you anymore, obviously.
He probably was still a little frustrated because, 25 years old or whatever I was, 24 years old, probably thought he maybe needed to control me a little more than he did. But,
and isn't that how it is too? As we get older, we get more cynical and we tell ourselves why something won't work instead of why it will.
That's right. That's
and that is a challenge for innovation. Point. Yeah. Well, the more you know, sometimes the more dangerous. You just have to know how to put those things in perspective. And that actually ties in really well to one of the things I wanted to chat with you a little bit about today. You have been working with inventors, independent inventors, for many years. Mm-hmm. And I know you've been a friend to the inventors organizations around the country and supported them, as well as a big part of the programs that are offered through like the Chicago Houseware Show. What do you see are some of the most common mistakes that inventors make if they're ideally going to retail with their product? They don't want to license it. Sure. What kinds of roadblocks do you think that they're creating for themselves?
Well, the one that always jumps out is they run out of money often before they get to the point of selling.
Now, is that because it's so expensive? Or because of
I think there's a number of things. I think sometimes they spend too much money on patents. I think that's often the case. I think they also maybe don't realize how expensive it is to do something. I mean, mm-hmm. When we launched Widgeteer, my partner at the time, in fact, Ron Sargent is his name, he invented the Porta Potty back in 1959.
Wow.
And I remember when we launched the product that we launched Widgeteer with, it was called Vacket. And I think with the tooling and everything, we spent almost $100,000 on it.
Wow.
To bring it to market. And it didn't really, I'll say it failed. It didn't really fail. It started the company and we sold about $70,000 worth of product. But at the cost it took, I lost about $70,000 on it.
But the
But that
Porta
was
Potty is
interesting.
successful. So how did that come to be?
Well, and I viewed it as being successful because it started the company. It taught me a lot of lessons. It taught me a lot of things. It really started the company. It got me involved with innovation more and more. I think it made me realize some of the pitfalls. My plan with the product was to make it ultra successful. So instead of maybe going out and buying tooling that was inexpensive and maybe aluminum tooling, I wound up going out buying 4-cavity tooling and all this stuff, and spent $70,000 on tooling when I probably could have got it all done and presented to retailers for 5,000. Well, not that. It would probably have been $10,000, but it would have been a lot cheaper.
Okay, so I'm confused because when I picture the Porta Potty, I'm picturing those giant things outside
Oh,
of events.
I wasn't talking about the Porta Potty. I was just saying he invented the Porta Potty.
Oh, it was that second.
Yes, what we launched together was a product called Vacket. In fact, I'll reach across, and I always keep it here. This is actually what it looked like.
Oh, cool. Put it a little closer to your camera, a little closer for us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
Was it removed air from any zip-tight freezer bag.
That's right. I remember that.
And I actually kept this box because when we produced it, it was all 4-color packaging and everything, but I didn't put a lot of eyes on it. And there's actually 3 misspelled words.
And no one else had ever pointed that out to you?
No, never thought of it.
Wow.
And so I remember pulling into of course it all shipped to my house, so we were shipping from my house. And I remember, my wife was really excited about seeing it. I said, that's great. I'm glad you're excited, but I said, there's a problem. And she said, what? And I said, well, there's 3 misspelled words on that box.
Oh my goodness.
So we ordered new boxes, and then we took the guts out and put it all in the new box.
Repackaged them all. How many units did you have to do that with?
It was like 2,000 units, which sometimes
must have
doesn't
been a
sound
fun
like a lot. But,
couple of days. Lessons learned.
And then we wound up throwing away the old stuff, and
right.
So I think the other piece you asked me about things that are roadblocks, I think it's hurrying and not really following the steps. We were really trying to hurry, and I just didn't, I just struggled with that. We hurried too much. And then I remember flying out to Providence, Rhode Island, and the CVS buyer was really excited about the product, and I was just jazzed. It was going to be awesome, and he was talking about, it had to be $1 million item,
Sure.
good, and on and on and on. It was awesome. And about 2 weeks later, he called me, and, now that I think about it, he didn't call me. I think it was another buyer, and he either was fired or let go, but he just, of course, then it was hard to follow people. LinkedIn makes it easy now, but he just was poof gone. And that was the end of CVS and Vacket.
And I hear that's pretty common, that the retail buyer turnover rate is pretty high.
It's terrible. But you and I talked about the other day, the Walmart.com buyers. I think in about a 6-month period, we've had 7 different buyers.
In 6 months. So what's the secret to rebuilding those relationships each time a new one comes in?
Well, probably in fact, I have a good example of one that we've been able to really do. We have another product that's a single product called Ball Back. It fits on a basketball rim, and when you make a basket, it throws the ball back to the shooter rather than dribbling the ball down and going down a hill. That was actually from an inventor that when we bought that. But Dick's Sporting Goods is our biggest customer, and I shouldn't admit this, but I'm going to. We've had probably,
it's okay, it'll just be between us.
Just between us girls. We've had 6 or 7 buyers probably in the 7 or 8 years that I've called on them. But this most recent buyer I've never met. And part of it is because what they do is every 6 months they send me a forecast. And then we start filling the orders, and it just goes very, very smoothly. And so they send me an email. I send the guy an email saying, okay, let me think, we're We have the forecast through through February right now. So about the middle of this month, I'm going to reach out to him and say, hey, we need the forecast for next year. And he'll forward an email to his assistant buyer, and he or she, whoever it is now, I don't know, will send me the forecast. And then we'll start getting purchase orders, and then we start filling, and then we do it. And it's every 6 months we do that.
Wow.
And the point of it is that I make it dumb easy for them. We ship right, we manufacture right, we follow all their guidelines, all the shipping information, all the vendor compliance, everything is done. And there's this one little item that they do about $1 million worth of sales with every year, about $1.3 million.
Wow.
And they don't have to worry about it.
Sure. I'm sure it's easier when there's some history there.
Mm-hmm.
What should our audience know about calling on a buyer for the first time when they're pitching their product, though, and they don't have that kind of history?
Well, first to remember is that the buyer's time is really super precious. And so that's really important. So you're not going to go in and start talking about what a great day it is and the weather. It might be a good starting point, but
But all the sales books tell us to go in and build rapport first.
Yeah, no. You want to, but the big thing is you can build rapport for about 30 seconds saying what a nice day is. But what I typically do is thank them so much, or he or she so much, for their time.
Right.
And I immediately get into it. But what I try to remember is that the buyer doesn't really care about Bill McHenry or anything. The buyer cares about him or her, he or she. It doesn't matter. And I use the analogy. I remember one time years and years ago, there was an inventor I was working with, and she said to me, Bill, she said, if you could sell this product to Walgreens, I could get a house on Lake Michigan. And I use that as an example in some of my speaking, because I'm like, can you imagine me going into a buyer and saying, gosh, if you buy this, I can get a house on Lake Michigan. It's so the buyer could care less.
Right.
And so you have to get it out of your mind that that's your baby, first of all. Mm-hmm. You got to go in with the fact that there has to be a reason the buyer needs it. And I tell people is to go in and forget about using the term product. You have a solution and you have to look for the problem. And find out what the buyer's problem is, and I think that's one of the reasons we do well at Dick's Sporting Goods with that one product, because his problem is that we're a one-item vendor. He doesn't have time for any BS. Mm-hmm. All he wants to do is write a purchase order to me, know it ships, it goes there right, and everything is fine, and he can sell it in the store. So he doesn't have to worry about all that.
So what matters? How do you know what matters to the buyer? What are you going to put in your presentation when you're pitching them the first time?
Sure. A lot of it, I think you have to ask. I think if you go into stores, especially retail is a little easier because you can go into stores and ask store people and you can see what's going on. So you really do your research. Years ago when you didn't have the internet, you didn't have connections, you didn't have, you and I are connected on LinkedIn. How many connections do you and I have combined? You have thousands of connections.
Right.
There's always ways to find people that will have ideas for you. And what I often say is I think a lot of people really like to help people for the most part. There's a few bad apples, as you and I both know. But for the most part, I think people really enjoy helping people. So look for someone that can help you. Maybe it's a friend or a friend of a friend or whatever that has some ideas that can help you.
But if you're going into a store with a PowerPoint, for example, is that what you walk in with, a deck and pitch?
Sometimes. If I do a deck, like you said, it might be 3 pages.
Okay.
The buyer's not going to go through much. He or she doesn't have really a lot of time.
And what do they care about? What do they want to see on that deck?
Well, I think what they want to do is they want to be sure. Well, to give you an example, we went to Tractor Supply this summer, and what the thing was an open buying event. I remember. And what they asked us for was to take pictures of where you think these products should go in their stores.
Wow.
So that was all they wanted. So what I did was, this gal and I that works for me, she and I she lives in Pittsburgh, so she and I went to some Tractor Supply stores, and it was our reading glass that we were presenting to them. And we asked the store manager if we could go around and we could put the reading glasses and take some pictures and do some different things. So Vicki and I went around the store, took pictures of where the reading glasses would go, and that was our presentation to the buyer, along with what we thought the retail would be. And you know, the buyer said, I'm sorry, I spoke, the buyer said to me, she said, it was at the end of the day, she said, you were the first presentation we've had in 2 days that did exactly what we wanted us to do.
Like that's that hard, right? Wow, that's awesome.
What they want. It needs to be very, very short, sweet, and to the point.
So let's talk about margin just a little bit.
Sure.
It changes from retail channel to retail channel.
Often, yes.
And sometimes even inside like a discount store may vary as well from one to the other.
And it depends on the product you're selling too.
Right.
You know, clothing has, you know, could have as much as 100 or even 200% gross margin for a retailer. Wow. You know, you look at like fruit in a grocery store, the margins are huge on that because there's so much perishable stuff that they throw away.
They have to have it.
With what we sell, sporting goods and housewares, I always present at 50% margin. So if something, and that's the other thing inventors make mistakes on, is they say, okay, well, my product cost me $5, so I need to sell it for 10, and the retailer has to then sell it for 19. Well, that's the reverse. What you should do is look and say, okay, this is a product, you know, this pen, and right, all the pens on the market are selling for $6, $5.99. So what I need to be sure of is that retailer can buy this pen for $3 because it's retail for $6.99. So I better figure out how I can make money by selling it for $3.
Right on.
That's with the reverse.
Backing it out. And then there's a lot to be said for perceived value too, that is often underestimated or overlooked, in that just because it only cost you $1 to make, if people are willing to spend $30 or $50 on it, then that's what you should charge, because it's a lot easier to reduce the price later, if not impossible to raise it later.
You can always go down in price. I always say you can almost never go up. Although we have raised the price of Allback a few times over the years, but we used the reason that, you know, polypropylene pricing was going up, raw material pricing, and so on. But it's very difficult. So you really need to be sure that you understand what your costs are, and you need to really understand what the retailer or the customer you're calling on really needs to sell the product for.
Sure. If the cost does have to go up based on materials, for example, did they raise it at retail as well, or did they absorb that in their margin?
You know, most of the time they absorb it. It seems they don't usually raise the retails. You know, they look for other ways. You know, maybe there's some special offers that they can do, or they can change the package size or do different things like that. You know, you'll see, like I know Wal-Mart, if you look at like health and beauty care, you know, I was trying to think, I use a body wash. I can't think of the name of it now, but if I go into Walmart, I pay the same price as I do in Walgreens, but the Walmart bottle is about 6 ounces bigger, you know? Yeah, so they look for that, just ways of changing things to make the profit. So this happened.
So, you know, cost of goods, margins, we've got packaging and all of the challenges that can come up with that, and manufacturing. I'm a very firm believer in making better inventors by educating them on how to solve problems that will sell, as opposed to just solving the problem. And it has to sell to all the constituencies, right? So it has to sell to the manufacturer, it has to be made. It has to sell to the distributor, the margins have to be there, and shippable, and freight, and retail, and dollars per square inch, which you can address if you'd like.
Sure.
I'd love to dig into what advice you would give to inventors who maybe have identified a problem and haven't gone that far down the path, or even just considering doing something about it. How would they go? What should they take into mind and consideration when solving that problem, so they can make sure they're inventing a solution that sells? Which boxes do they need to make sure they check?
Yeah, well, the one thing is to make sure there's a lot of people that are going to buy it. You know, You
Okay.
might have something
Massive
that,
deal.
right, you might
Or
have something
enough,
that, exactly,
whatever that is.
exactly. It was something that, Lisa Lloyd might love it, but if Lisa Lloyd's the only one that's going to buy it, you're not going to make a lot of money,
And if only 3 people are going to buy it and you're going to make $1 million just selling to 3 people, that might be okay too,
That might be
right?
okay. That's
So
true.
it's a matter
That's
of
very
knowing.
true.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
really need to know, or at least have a good idea, and it's nothing is a sure thing. That's the other thing, unfortunately. I wish it was. We've made more mistakes. You and I have talked about some of the mistakes we both made over the years. It's never ending.
So how do I test my idea with enough people to have validation to then bring to a buyer and say, look, this is the evidence that this will sell in your store?
Well, a couple things. One is you can go survey people. I always, in fact, it's funny, when we came out with Vacket, I remember showing my mom. Everyone loved it. I showed my mom.
We always go to
Everyone
mom
tells me,
first.
I know,
We
but
all do
everyone
that.
says, don't show it to your family, don't show it to your friends. Well, in my case, everyone loved Vacket until I showed it to my mom, and I never forget, my mom says, I would never buy that. It's ridiculous. And she would never buy it. I remember my dad saying, well, Gene, you better hope it sells, because he helped me with financing.
Oh
And of
gosh.
course, mom was right as usual. But then there's Survey Monkey. There's lots of ways of talking to people, going into a retailer's store, going and thinking about people that will use your solution and what they like about it, what they would change. And then if you can get in front of some real store buyers, that's really interesting too. The other thing is, it's been really interesting the last few years, because of the internet. You can go try and sell it on Amazon and see what kind of responses you get.
Well, what if you don't have inventory?
Well, then that would only be if you have inventory. There's also, and I've never done it, but there's all these sites, where you can, oh shoot, I can't think of the name of them, but you can raise money. Kickstarter is the word I'm looking
Oh yeah, yeah.
for.
Indiegogo, all of
Kickstarter
those.
sites.
Crowdfunding, sure.
Exactly, you can do that. So you can kind of take it step by step, talk to your, people that not friends and family, but people that that would give you honest feedback, and continue to research that way. If you can finally get some product, maybe try and sell it online, see what happens. And of course, products cost, the more you buy, the cheaper you can buy it for.
Right.
Often maybe you buy 50, that costs you more than you can actually sell it for. But
Right.
at least you're not buying 50,000 and having a whole garage full of product that didn't sell. And you and I both know people that have financed their houses and their kids' education and all this stuff, and have a garage full of crap that won't sell.
Right.
Ever.
Well, and so that's why I'm really trying to dig and probe a little bit deeper here on the ideation part. So I believe ordinary people going about their day, consumers, make the best, or recognize the problems that need to be solved the best, much better than the captive innovator at a Procter & Gamble, for example, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Because they're out going about their day and they're like, God, there's got to be a better way, as Donnie
Right.
Deutsch used to always say. The challenge is they don't make great inventors. They're great at identifying the problem, but not so much the solution, because they have limited data from which to draw to develop a solution that will sell. They don't understand manufacturing and retail space. So I'll give you an example, which I'm all about the story. So I'm so grateful that you've done that several times already. When most people don't realize that TC Pets, Treasure Chest Pets, the one that I was on Shark Tank with, was actually not my original invention. That was a woman, Sandra Castillo, had invented something called Bow Pets, and it was a very, very large hair accessory and jewelry organizer, mostly hair accessories. And it would retail for probably $20 to $30, but it was so big that when I showed it to my contacts in, at Conair and Helen of Troy and all of these large accessory companies, they all said, it's clever, there's something there, but it's too big. And that's when they brought up the ROI for retail space, right? It's like real estate, and they measure their success by dollars per square inch. For those who don't know that, that's what retailers do. And that's how they know what the return on that investment is. And so if they're talking about this much space for only $30 versus all the things they could get in there, they're going to get a higher return on that real estate with smaller products or higher margin products maybe. Mm-hmm. So that's why I took it, licensed it from her, redesigned it, repurposed it as a toy. And then ultimately that's the one that was on Shark Tank. She couldn't know that.
No, she wouldn't.
She had limited information. It was clever. She identified a real problem. So what do you think, and I'm totally, this is going to catch you completely off guard, so take a minute to think about it if you need to, and we can come back to it. But what do you think will help people who identify a problem grow their knowledge, their data set from which to then develop better solutions? Is it a series of interviews? Because at the time you're making it and selling it, it's too late.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's way too late.
It's too late to find that out. That's when you are losing your home and your wife and your dog and your country song.
That's right. That's right. Well, you kind of nailed it a little bit. You know, you said you went to buyers and you talked to different people, but you talked to different people in different areas of the whole production. You know, you went to a manufacturer. You talk to them. You talk to a retailer
and a retailer,
distributors, and if you start doing that, you're going to get a snapshot of an idea based on some piece of the whole process.
Sure.
You know, because I remember when we did Vacket, the guy at the factory in Mexico, we were manufacturing Tijuana. He was playing around with the prototypes, and I remember he said there was the fan piece that allowed the air to flow through. There was some strips on there that the edges were they were square. They were basically square. So as you turn the fresh snap, as we called it, into the bag, it was tearing the bag as a result of those little fans.
Oh, wow.
We would have never caught that. But because he was looking at it from an engineering standpoint, he got it. Exactly. And of course, Ron at the time, he was an engineer. So I actually showed him, and he picked up on it right away. And I'm a sales and marketing guy. I didn't
exactly.
I like the packaging that had the misspelled words. So Ryan changed it, right then and there. So I had an engineer and then a designer looking at something that they picked up on right away that I would have never seen.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people are afraid to go to an engineer early because beyond the exposure that they're afraid of and having it stolen, they want the ownership of the solution. And you think that you're not an inventor anymore if you have that input. Well, what I don't think most people understand is that if you go to a manufacturer or an engineer and just using their common knowledge, the patent office calls it one skilled in the art.
Sure.
Right? So they understand that this plastic works better and isn't brittle. So they're going to tell you this is what it needs to be made of. I'm working on a new mop, and the gears and the way everything works on it, I hired several engineers to work with me, and they came back with several different solutions, and I picked one to go with, but none of it was anything inventive. It was just ordinary knowledge, common knowledge for anybody who understands that. I just knew it needed to do this function and said, tell me what this is. And they figured that part out. And that doesn't make them a co-inventor. It just makes my invention better.
That's right. That's right. So. Yeah, I think people, there's a couple of things. They're afraid that someone's going to steal it. Mm-hmm. First of all, no one's going to steal anything that's just starting out, because when they're going to steal it is when it's successful.
Exactly.
And then the fact that, bless you, that they feel like they have to have, 100% into it, and it's all their ideas, and bless you. And they don't, I look at, my business, I'm good at a lot of things. I'm really good at selling, but there's some things like accounting. Oh man, I've got stuff sitting here on my desk. Oh my God. In fact, I'll even push it aside because I love finance, but I hate accounting. I hate numbers.
Yeah.
I get an email from my CPA asking me for this and that, and I'm like, I glaze over.
I can relate. Totally.
But you have to identify that, everybody has strengths and weaknesses.
Right. And it's important to have a team, and collaboration is where the most creativity gets fostered. So when someone, this is the other thing, I think that people push back, and I'm sure you had experience even where you've gone into a buyer and probably more in your earlier years, I'm sure learned better now, but the buyer pushes back and the temptation is to argue with them and tell them why they're wrong, as opposed to hearing what they're saying, because they are telling you something. Either it's something's wrong with your pitch because they don't understand it, or something about the way it's working isn't right and isn't going to work for them. So instead of fighting about it, acquiesce.
It's what I tell everyone is, in fact, I give this presentation. It's called I haven't done it in so long. The seven steps to successful sales call, or something like that. But one of the things that I do is I'll say to the group, I'll say, think of a salesperson, and I'll say, now raise your hand if you think salespeople talk all the time. And of course, I'll bet you 80% of the people will raise their hand that salespeople talk all the time. And I said, you're probably right, actually, but the best salesperson listens. You don't talk. And I used the example, there was a skiing trip that my wife Nancy and I went on years ago, and it was all people we didn't know. I can't even remember. In fact, I remember we didn't have a very good time either, but nevertheless, we went to this thing, and we stayed in this house, and there was all these different people. And when we left there, Nancy and I knew everything about everyone. We knew, it was crazy. And I said to the group, when I use this example, I said, as far as everyone knowing Nancy and I, they knew she worked for Marriott. They knew what her favorite hotel was. And they knew that I had my own business, but they really didn't know what it was because they didn't ask me any questions. And all we did was listen to these people yak about this and that. And, but she and I are salespeople.
Yep.
We listen. You create,
We could probably do a whole series on salesmanship, right?
Exactly.
Active listening,
Yeah.
leading questions.
Never fight with them, never corner them. I had a buyer years ago tell me, he cornered me. He said, we were talking about pricing. I remember he was going to give me this purchase order, and we were going to go to dinner and have a few beers. And he says, I'll just come in tomorrow. We'll do it in the morning. So I said, okay. So we went. The next day, I went in to get the purchase order, and the pricing was wrong. And I remember saying to the guy, I won't say his name, but I can see him as plain as day. He's probably never around anymore. But I said, Dave, this pricing is wrong. He said, this is the pricing we agreed on. He started getting mad. And then he said, do you want me to have my boss come in here and remind you what it was? And I said, well, yeah, why don't you? Because I know I'm right. Well, he blew a gasket, and actually what's the funny part of the whole story is I can't hear in my right ear. So as Dave is yelling at me, I reach down like this, actually, my bad ear to him now. He tells me to get the F out of his office.
Oh my goodness.
I don't hear this. And then I come up smiling. He gets madder. He blows up at me, and then I knew he told me to get the F out of his office. So it was, the arguing with the buyer. It's not.
Oh no, that's
not a win-win.
A good thing.
No.
So single product companies have a bigger challenge, as I understand it. Buyers would prefer to work with lines and have less customers to have to deal with on their own. Is that correct?
Yes, that's very true.
Yet you've been successful getting single products into stores. Can you tell me a little bit about how that's worked for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because Ballback just
don't argue. No.
Ballback just kind of happened with Dick's Sporting Goods. I guess I was pleading with the buyer, maybe, who knows, and he tested it in the stores. And then we made it very simple for him. As I look at all the other customers we have, none of them, I'm trying to think, most of them buy more than one item from us. So for the most part, it's very, very difficult. You have to have a real reason, something that really makes your solution stand out in that store. Mm-hmm. And we have these various brands. We have thousands of items that we could sell. but I think we have access to like 18 or 19,000 items, and we have about 200 in our warehouse. And I'm going to limit it down to about 110 next year. And then a buyer will see our price sheet, and they'll only select one or two, but they like the fact that there's a lot to choose from. I think, it's weird. It's I don't know. It's just a strange thing.
So is that one of the strategies to get a buyer to test it in a few stores and groveling?
And groveling.
Were there any other special circumstances that you created for them to make it an easier buy-in?
Well, we'll work. Pricing is always the last thing. Of course, you've got to be competitive, but we want to make sure that it's something that's unique and different. I wish I could come up with better words than unique and innovative, because now it's overused. But when I tell buyers about Widgeteer, I always say, we really have unique and innovative products. And then I always say, yeah, I know it's a salesman line, but we really do. And it gets people to at least look at things,
Yep.
The other piece of it is, I think, is to be really professional. I tell people you can really only make the first impression once, and it's really true. If you come in disheveled and you got papers everywhere, and you're not acting like you really know what's going on, that's how you're going to be perceived.
And it's hard to take you seriously at that point.
Exactly. You only get that one chance to make that first impression.
So let me see if I've got it right. And I mean, with your experience in helping companies to grow to over 100 million in sales and selling to Disney and Wal-Mart and Best Buy and all these wonderful retailers, it's probably pretty much all of those rules are pretty much the same no matter which retailer you go to, right?
They really are, and it's also pretty much the same as you go across the board too, because we sell in food service too. We sell distributors that call on the restaurant chains and so on.
Like general merchandise.
It's all general merchandise, no food, but it's all the same thing. It's a box. And there's a zillion boxes out there, and somehow you have to try and get piece or some sort of mind share with the buyer or whoever it is. And I find that with our external sales team, they have all these other brands to sell, and somehow I have to try and get them to see one or two or five or whatever the number is products that Widgeteer has, and so we get some kind of mind share from them.
Yeah. So you go in professional.
We
want to have a very short presentation that just tells them what they need to know, which is the pricing, why it's different, what makes it stand out in the store, especially if you're the only product in your line.
I would even, I'd be even as bold to say you don't even need to show them pricing.
Really?
Because it's just one more thing for them to push back on. They'll ask you what the suggested retail is. Or something, but I want pricing is, you can be beat on pricing by a penny, and pricing really shouldn't be the first thing. You want to show something that's unique and innovative, and remember that buyer is got a problem. You want to find out what that problem is, and you want to figure out how your solution solves their problem. And pricing is never the first thing, so you want to be careful.
So on a good day, you walk out with an order.
Yeah, on a real good day, Lisa.
On a good day, you end a good meeting. Tell me about the process then for how a buyer then places the order and what you need to be prepared for in fulfilling that.
Sure. Well, first of all, the order it can come immediately, which has actually happened to me very rarely, but once in a while.
Good day.
I could probably count it on one hand. Other times it can take forever. It could take even a year. We're talking to Sam's Club right now. We've been talking to them for 6 months, and I think they're finally going to place the order. But to answer your question, what the next steps are is first to be sure you're following up. And there's no reason why if you're sure you're going to get an order, you get an idea what the next steps are, to highlight it with the buyer and say, have a checklist, have your list of things that you want to ask he or she, and then at the end of the meeting, recap it. Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, Miss Buyer, this is what we've agreed that you want me to follow up on. And I'll do this by this date and so on. And so make sure you continue following up. But you also have to be persistent too. That's something I think people feel like, oh, I sent them an email. Well, yeah. You know, my wife Nancy gets 900 a day, you know, and I get probably 200 a day, you know. So you got to be persistent without being a pain in the neck with somebody. And when if you have the follow-up pieces, then you can do that. If the buyer, in fact, I'll use Edward Don as an example. We're talking to them about our porcelain. They wanted us to develop an incentive program for their salespeople. They need us to get our vendor numbers set up. They needed some different pricing on some different things and various things. And I just sent that all to her again today because she didn't respond last week. You know, so she has all that.
You waited 1 week to do the follow-up.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to stay top of mind. I don't want to be a pest. The Sam's Club buyer was a similar type thing. She wanted us to do all these things. We followed up with everything she wanted right away, within a day or two. Then we didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And finally, this gal that works with me, Vicky, reached out to the buyer again, and the buyer said, just give us 1 more week. So this week is the 1 more week. So Vicky will respond to her and follow up again. And you just got to keep following up and following up. And then, of course, once you get the order, make sure you fill it the way it's supposed to be filled and follow all the vendor compliance guidelines. It would be good to know ahead of time what the vendor compliance guidelines are too.
Sure, before you even go in there, so you're getting ready for it properly.
Right.
What is a typical, if there is, a typical first order? How many units or how many dollars should someone be prepared to have to fill? Well,
that's probably almost an impossible answer to answer.
You're welcome.
I think the way I would look at it is with a huge retailer like a Bed Bath & Beyond or somebody that size, they might do a test. They might test in 15 to 50 stores.
How many units would they put in a store?
Well, it depends on, how much shelf space they're going to give you. You talked about the square inch deal, It depends on the case cost, the size of the case. They often want a case, but our cases aren't usually dozens anymore. They're usually threes and sixes.
Wow.
So the key is you want to make it successful. So you want to identify with the buyer what the definition of success is. The buyer's definition of success might be not only do the 6 have to sell that you have on the shelf in each store, but we have to reorder 6 more and 3 of those have to sell.
Right.
Your idea of success might be, gosh, if I sell 2 per store, so you really want to know.
By the lake house.
Exactly. Then there's other retailers, that that might decide that they want to put everything, product in every store. So you're going to have to look at that.
So if someone, what I'm trying to do here is get at mitigating the risk for the independent inventor.
Sure.
If they have samples, they've done some testing, it's working, and they feel like they're ready, it's packaged right, the pricing's right, they're ready to go. They get into they get a meeting with a buyer. Is it okay for them not to have inventory yet?
Yes. Yeah, it really is, but you should know when you're going to be able to have inventory too.
Okay.
So you got to know your factory, it's going to take so much time for getting raw materials, it's going to take so much time for this and so much time for that, and then it's going to take the manufacturing time, and then it's the shipping time getting it here. We manufacture ball back in Iowa, so the shipping is easy, but some of our products are made in China, so the shipping is 30 days.
Right.
I can have our ball back product, that guy, because he's so great to work with, I know that he could turn it on tomorrow. If I called him today and I said, Mike, I gotta have more product, and he might be out of stock, he'd put it in the tool tomorrow. But then you have to remember the manufacturing time. Ball back, as an example, is a huge item. It's polypropylene, it's 2 feet long and 1 foot wide. So the cycle time to make one piece is 90 seconds. And that sounds like, well, it's quick, count to 90, it's done. Well, but multiply that by, how many in a day. And I should know off the top of my head, I used to know, I think it's 500 pieces in an 8-hour shift, or I forgot, something like that. But it's very small. And if the buyer at Dick's Sporting Goods all of a sudden needs 5,000 of them, there's got to be some planning involved with that, because it takes a while. So you need to know that.
So having that conversation, hopefully you get to the point with a buyer where they're asking buying questions.
Right.
How long?
And they're going to ask that. And what's the
great.
lead time is the word they're going to use. What's the lead time?
Yeah.
And you need to know. And I always fudge a little. And by that, I mean, if I think it's going to be 60 days, I'll say 90, and then they're happy. You should underpromise and overperform.
Can you, if you get it in sooner, will they take delivery early?
Probably not. No, you're going to have to warehouse it then. You're going to probably have to warehouse it anyway. And then there's all those costs.
Mm-hmm.
There's the whole way is cost. It never, ever ends. I have a friend, he's, in fact, he invented insect repellent.
Oh, wow.
And he also, I asked him one day, I said, John, if you ever added up all the things, the consumer packaged goods that you invented over the years and sold, what would the annual volume be? And he said it's probably over 300 million a year in sales. So he's ultra successful. So one day we were traveling together. I'll never forget, we were at a courtyard we were in North Carolina having a beer. And I was kind of grousing because, he's in his late 70s. He's been a great mentor. And I said, does the money thing ever change? Does it ever get easier? He looked at me and he said, never, and started laughing. It just
always got to play the game.
Always.
Something our audience may have never heard of, direct import.
Sure.
So have you ever done any deals with buyers where you don't have that warehousing challenge? Mm-hmm. They order a container load and negotiated successfully those types of deals?
Yeah, in fact, our largest customer is a company based in Wisconsin, and they buy a couple products a year from us that's all made out of stainless steel. And they like to come up with different ideas. This last one, well, maybe I can't. The one before last was a spoon that we engraved their logo on it, and mm-hmm. we put it in. In fact, if I walk away, I know exactly where it is. So let me.
Okay.
So sorry, I shouldn't do that, but I had.
No, that's great.
It was a spoon. I saw it today. So you see the silver spoon?
Oh yeah.
It's about, I don't know, 8 inches long or so. And it's got their logo on it. We etched their logo on the back, and then they wanted to put it in a bag. It's a cotton bag with their logo on it. They ordered 80,000 of them. Wow. And we made them in China. And the way we did that, we started out with it wasn't a mock-up because it actually was an existing product with one of the factories we work with. But we started with that, and then we started tweaking it. What the original one was, you see how the tip you can kind of pour this way, kind of designed.
Yeah.
The original one, the tip was a little wider, if I remember right, and so the marketing people wanted to make it a little narrower. They wanted to make it a little stronger. I remember we went around with the brand. They wanted to be on top, and I said, it's kind of a nice spoon. I said, I actually goofed. Fortunately, they know me well. I said, it's kind of a nice spoon. Why would you ruin it by putting your brand on the top?
I knew you were going there.
Yeah, I know. Me and my big mouth. And this gal, Anna's her name, and Anna looked at me and she kind of laughed. She says, I'm really glad that we like you. And as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh. I said, well, that was brilliant.
Classic.
But anyway, yes, to answer your question, so we did that, and we started developing it. We sent samples back and forth, sent samples of the bag back and forth, and we finally got to a production sample. And the factory sent me 5 or 6 of them. So I sent it to everybody so they could all look at it, and made sure I had all in writing, emails. It's all emails because the one group is in Dallas, the other group's north of me about an hour in Wisconsin. So I had all that in writing, that everything was fine. And then they negotiated pricing after that, which really ticked me off because I agreed to pricing and then they came back for more.
I hate that.
But it worked out. And then Then there's the logistics piece, of the factory now has to get the stuff. Then we had to pay 50% up front, but the customer paid me 50% up front. So I got their money and then I was able to give it to the factory. So it worked out fine.
And 80,000 pieces was one full container, like a 40-foot container?
It was, no, I don't think.
Or a 20-foot?
I think it was 10 pallets or something. It
Oh,
wasn't
that's
a
it?
container. I can't remember now.
Okay. And so for those who maybe don't know what direct import is, could you explain it?
Well, basically what it is that you ship it from the factory directly to the customer rather than the factory to a warehouse and then ship it to a customer. So you save the warehousing costs, because there's always something there. And then every time the product moves, no matter where it goes, there's a cost.
Exactly.
And, so we miss this one cost. So you think of a triangle. So it goes from A to C rather than A to B to C.
Right.
And it's, then there's what I
know how many pieces fit in a 20-foot and in a 40-foot when preparing maybe for those meetings with the buyers, because if they're a large enough buyer and they have a distribution center, they may want a container to ship straight to their DC, correct? Exactly.
Or they may want a truckload or whatever. So it's good to know that. The good thing is that there's a lot of forwarders, freight forwarders around, some really big, some really small. There's some bad ones and there's some good ones. I always go by my gut. I've got 3 that I use, and I probably use them because I like them. But I also keep them honest because I like all 3 of them. But I also, I trust but verify.
Yep.
The pricing. But then they handle that. What they'll say is, so what does it weigh? What does the box weigh? How many on a pallet? Da, 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 da. And then they can say, okay, they do their math. Remember, I don't like accounting. Right. They do their accounting stuff, and they come back and say, okay, a container is X.
Sure.
I don't have to do anything.
I can't believe it's been almost an hour already. Before we wrap up, I know that you're interested in helping inventors, that you will work with inventors to either get their products made and sold, and you have. So the Ballback was one of those, correct? You met them at an inventors meeting also? Yeah,
I was in Fort Lauderdale, or rather Fort Myers, at the Edison Inventors Club, which was really kind of a cool place to speak.
That's awesome.
And that inventor walked up to me. I remember all the inventors were hovering around me, they wanted to ask me all these questions and stuff. And this guy kind of walked up and he handed me his card, and he just said, give me a call sometime. And he just walked away. And everyone else was just carrying on. And I remember I was really intrigued by that. And of course, I got all these other cards, but Tom's was the first card I called. He was the first one I called.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So at what point, for those who may be interested in reaching out to you, at what point would you consider them ready to talk to you? What stage would you like them to be at?
Can I tell them what we're going to do?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Lisa's going to be the new head of widget development for Widgeteer.
Awesome, made up title.
And we're going to start from any level of invention all the way up to having a product that we can look at. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be, we're going to do it, announce it next year, really, in January, and really go full tilt at the Houseware Show in March. But I think what'll be neat is, first, I get to work with you again, which will be a blast.
Yeah.
But I think what will be really neat is that there's so many pitfalls that inventors can fall into at almost every single stage of the process, even, at the end of it when they have inventory. And I think it's something that we can really help inventors to kind of walk them through it. And, I mentioned the guy, John, that helped me over the years. I've had so many people help me over the years. The only way I can really pay anybody back is to pay it forward. And that's what I want to do. So
awesome.
With your help, we'll be able to really talk to anybody, anytime.
Yeah, and we can all make some money in the process of helping each other, right?
That's right.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think I prefer to deal with inventors at the idea stage before they've potentially invented something that won't sell or patented something that won't sell, et cetera. And I know you're not even going to be charging for the services. It's just a matter of representing them and getting their products in the stores. And this is an incredible opportunity, I think, for anyone who might be listening or watching. If you have an idea that you believe can go direct to retail and you're in a position to finance that, fund that, or potentially find the funds for it, Bill McHenry and Widgeteer. Now, are you going to do that through Envision Sales and Marketing also?
No, Envision is just kind of going away slowly, mostly just for accounting reasons. I don't really need to have two companies.
Sure.
I keep it.
Merge the two.
Yeah, Widgeteer basically bought the assets of ESM, as we call it internally.
Okay.
There's still an Envision Sales and Marketing website. It's esmsales.com, but it hasn't been touched in years. But it's something that we'll just keep out there. But Widgeteer is more fun,
Yeah.
fun name. I've had people say you can't really say Widgeteer without smiling.
It's true.
And it's really kind of funny.
It's true.
When I call people, I always say, they wonder how you spell Widgeteer, and I said it's like Mouseketeer but widget.
Right, exactly.
Right away,
It's a brilliant name.
So,
now, I know you say you're open to all things consumer products, but the reality is your sweet spot is in houseware, sporting goods.
it really is. Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing, because that's where the buyers that we call on are, and it's where we've been selling now for the last 6 or 7 years, really focused on that more than anything. But the other piece of the whole thing is, I don't think it has to necessarily be that for what you and I are doing, because invention is invention. In bringing a product or a solution to market, no matter where it goes, it's the same process. It's identical,
Right.
So just I think that we can really teach people. There really is.
Yeah. And collaborating and working with great people is part of that formula.
Exactly. But to be careful of who you work with, that's the important thing.
Noted.
There's in every industry there's shite. What's that?
I was telling our audience, did you hear what he said? He said, be careful. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And it's not to say that there aren't great people out there, but there are less great than there are not so great folks. Right. So yeah, you have to watch out who you're working with. Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much. Envision Sales and Marketing, soon to be exclusively Widgeteer. I'm excited about working with you and your team as well, and seeing what we can do to get more innovation, awesome products on the market. So thank you for your time today so much.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
If someone wants to reach out to you before February, before our official launch in February, is there a way that they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Our website is Widgeteer, like Mouseketeer, but widgets. Widgeteer Inc. Don't forget to add Inc. inc.com. Mm-hmm. Or you can email me, and it's relatively easy email. It's B like Bill McHenry, my last name, at widgeteerinc.com.
B McHenry at widgeteerinc.com.
Yes.
Awesome. And
or they can contact you.
Yeah, that's right. I'll go there too. And I'm happy to help anyone as well. And that's what we will be setting up, a way for a more formal submission process.
Yes.
So it's not just for manufacturing and distribution, though. You have manufacturers that could be interested in licensing, and we're going to work together to help people get in front of those companies as well. So if you're not in a position or just don't want to be in that business, frankly, I wouldn't want to be in that business. I prefer licensing. That's my sweet spot. I don't want to just work on one product.
Sure.
Then you can still reach out. So you can reach out to Bill directly, or you can also go to our website, lloydmarketinggroup.com. Just sign up for the newsletter. We're updating folks as we continue to roll out new programs or new connections or shows like this, so that we can share them with our audience and work together, all together anyway, on getting our ideas to market. So thanks again, Bill, so much for this. I really appreciate it. I will see you in February.
Sounds great, Lisa. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Have a good day. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have an awesome day and happy holidays. Bye-bye.